Now, I think without question, the biggest, most exciting, and internet buzz generating moment of the Disney era of Star Wars so far has been the return of Luke Skywalker. And I mean the real Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian Season 2, not what many, including Mark Hamill himself, calls Jake Skywalker, who we saw in the sequel trilogy. His appearance, Jake's, caused a, shall we say, whole different type of reaction on the internet. But seriously here, there isn't a bigger, more talked about, and sort of celebrated moment in the Disney era of Star Wars than when Luke showed up in The Mandalorian and had one of the most epic scenes in the history of the franchise. And the crazy excitement around that scene has many wondering or asking, why doesn't Disney and Lucasfilm capitalize off it and use Luke more, considering just how popular, and thus profitable, he is? I mean, after that Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, where, again, Grogu went off at Luke, it almost seemed like a no-brainer that we'd get some sort of series, maybe an animated one, where Luke starts to train Grogu and attempts to rebuild the Jedi Order, and I'm sure Mark Hamill would have been more than happy to lend his voice to something like that. And it could have been a series where Luke also begins to train Ben Solo at the same time, who could be maybe sort of jealous of Grogu and his power, or jealous of how much attention Luke gives him. That it seems like Grogu is being groomed to take over the Jedi Order when Luke is gone and not Ben, and he obviously doesn't like that, and it opens the door to Palpatine from afar to start corrupting him, and, well, we know how that all plays out in the end and where it leads to. And though sure, that's a road not all fans want to see them go down, many fans have no interest in the sequel trilogy time period, but a series with Luke, Grogu, and Ben could maybe, just maybe, if done right, start to soften the blow of that aforementioned Jake Skywalker in the sequels for at least some fans. A recent poll I did basically showed that at least half of those who watch my channel anyway and don't like the sequels are open to the time period being explored or willing to give it a chance. And so, in theory, perhaps something actually could be done in a lead-up story to the sequels that, well, maybe wouldn't make everyone suddenly like that story choice or even ever enjoy the sequel films. For some, maybe most, that's just not possible. But they might begrudgingly accept them as part of the story and move on. That's probably the biggest win they, Lucasfilm and Disney, could ever hope to get when it comes to some fans and the sequels, something akin to tolerance. And something somewhat similar to all this went down with the Clone Wars animated series, where it enhanced the prequel trilogy by bringing in the main characters from those films, like Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme, and so on, and told more stories that helped flesh out the whole time period, stories the films simply didn't have time for. Though in that case, with the Clone Wars series, it was more about, as I kind of just said, fleshing out or expanding the story, an already solid story, and in the middle of that story, whether by the intentional design of George Lucas or be it just coincidence, there was a great idea for a series, a whole war the movies didn't really explore, baked right into the whole trilogy. This time around with Grogu, Luke, and Ben, it'd have to come before the films and help fix the story during the build-up process to the films. Either way, the Clone Wars ended up being a very popular series with fans. They loved getting more stories that involved those main characters, though it also, of course, brought in many new characters that became fan favorites as well, in large part because of their connection to those main characters, or the legacy characters. Much of the reason why so many fans love Ahsoka today was because of that initial connection to Anakin Skywalker. That's why the decision to have Luke sort of stand in opposition to Rey in the sequels was such an odd choice in my book. It's not the way to endear a new character to the audience. Tearing down the old hero and insisting the new one is better is not the best way to make fans of that old hero like the new one, especially when they, Lucasfilm and Disney, very clearly want or wanted to be the face of their franchise going forward. But I digress, and getting back to the point, they seem to have had the perfect idea for a series served up to them on a silver platter. With Luke taking Grogu for training at the end of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, they had the chance to put two of the most beloved characters in the history of the franchise together for a series, but instead opted to return Grogu to Din Djarin immediately, though of course Jon Favreau says the idea was his and his alone, which sure, could be true. But I can't imagine Disney had no say or took no interest whatsoever in what was going to be done with Grogu after the success of him, not only overall across the first 2 seasons of the show, but after he went off with Luke and pretty much set the internet on fire. There's virtually no way they at Disney or Kennedy at Lucasfilm didn't have a talk with Favreau at all about what he's going to do next with Grogu, and just let it be completely his call. I mean, let's be real, Disney doesn't really care about the story. Star Wars is simply a brand to them where content is generated in order to sell it to the masses to make a lot of money. Though I suppose it could simply be that the bean counters at Disney thought that if something ain't broke, you don't fix it. That since Din Djarin and Grogu worked so well together for 2 seasons, why mess with that formula? Why not just reunite the two for season 3 and, in their minds, guarantee the same level of success as they had with the previous 2? And save Luke for something else, perhaps. Like, why not say include him in a sort of remake of the classic Heir to the Empire novels by Timothy Zahn, which is something we know they are doing. They are, to some extent, bringing those novels to life in the new canon. And with the way technology is going these days, we're probably not far off, maybe even a few years away, from being able to use those old characters, their voices and likenesses, in a way that is so real we won't tell the difference anymore. We're close to crossing that uncanny valley to the point where it really could look and sound just like a young Mark Hamill on screen playing Luke Skywalker. Though the problem with that is it currently seems like Ahsoka may end up being the star of this whole thing instead of Luke. And I say currently seems that way because we really don't know how things are going to shake out with this whole Heir to the Empire or Mandoverse time period. Who knows what their plans really entail. What we do know is there is going to be a Dave Filoni movie that will be the culmination of this whole Mandoverse time period, and that could be when Luke, and maybe others like Han, Leia, Lando, and so on, could also be included to some extent. Or who knows, maybe there will be a series featuring Luke before that happens to allow him, and maybe the others as well, to be a part of all of this to build up to that film. I mean, just imagine how huge that could be, if done right, to see the original characters assemble once more to stop a threat, like they should have done in the first film of the sequel trilogy. And again, if done right, and if the technology is truly there, or will be in the near future, that again sounds like a no-brainer out of Disney and Lucasfilm that has big dollar signs written all over it. You'd think they'd be doing anything and everything they can to win back those old fans and their money. And yet there are rumors coming out of Lucasfilm, and mind you, rumors come out of Lucasfilm all the time. They are a dime a dozen, so this may be nothing. But the rumor is that Lucasfilm does not see or want to see Luke Skywalker be a significant part of the future of Star Wars. Which could mean one of two things, one of which being he's going to be saved only for special occasions, like how he was used in the Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian and subsequently in the Book of Boba Fett. Or 2, they just don't plan on using him a whole lot for any reason whatsoever because they don't want to. They don't want to see a white man always coming in and being the savior when things are most dire or something along those lines. Even though, like I've been saying, when he shows up, he brings the dollars with him. He's pretty much guaranteed money when handled correctly anyway. Or, I don't know, maybe the reason they don't want to use him is they feel like he'll always overshadow whoever else or whatever else is going on when he shows up. That was J.J. Abrams' main fear when writing The Force Awakens, that Luke would steal the spotlight from the new characters, and so he didn't include him. Even though the sad parting of Din Djarin and Grogu more than held its own against the awesome spectacle of Luke's return, he didn't steal the spotlight from them, they simply shared it. But anyway, again, this is all rumor, but what isn't rumor is what Kathleen Kennedy recently said when asked if the Force ghost of Luke would be a part of the upcoming Rey movie, or if there'd maybe be some flashbacks that included Luke. I mean, that sounds like another no-brainer to have her, Rey, helped by Luke as she builds her new Jedi Order. To again show these two working together because, go figure, people tend to like new heroes when they get along with the old ones, and aren't just replaced by them. But when asked, Kennedy simply said, "I don't know if we'll spend a lot of time in flashbacks or Force ghosts or things like that, but certainly the spirit of what he represents to her is gonna be significant." And I'm curious what she means by the spirit of what he represents. Is she talking about those couple days together where Luke tried to convince her not to be a Jedi and she had to basically run away from him? Or when she came back and Luke gave her a 3-minute pep talk in The Rise of Skywalker? But seriously, it doesn't sound like they really have any intention of using Luke at all in this upcoming Rey film, or maybe much at all ever again. Which is really confusing. It's a surprise that they don't seem interested in using arguably the most popular character in the history of the franchise much at all. I mean, is it because the fans who want Luke the most are the toxic fans who didn't like The Last Jedi, and so by using him, they feel like they're giving in to them, and that'll look bad in the eyes of the media? Or is it something else? Do they want to move away from him because they don't like the idea of him being the face of the franchise? Is it just not a good look in their opinion in this day and age? Or is it something else entirely? A desire to take the franchise down a whole new sort of direction, one that they can make all their own or claim it to be all their own, instead of one more based on the legacy of George Lucas? Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Why are they not doing more with Luke Skywalker? Is it because they are actively avoiding using him? Or do they maybe have a big secret plan for him that will be revealed in time? Or do they just want to use him sparingly on those special occasions? Whatever you think, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.